Hey, everybody, and welcome to How to Make Films and Influence People with Peter and Andrew, where we talk about our own approach to screenwriting and filmmaking, discuss great works of cinema, and blasphemously imagine how they could be remade. This week, we'll be talking about The Dark Knight and giving an update on our current screenplay project that you, the audience, has been contributing to. I'm really excited. So, first of all, I'm Peter, successful filmmaker, film professor, and screenwriter.
I'm Andrew. I am a screenwriter, a filmmaker, but not an ophthalmologist by choice.
We want to update everyone, as we do every week, on our screenplay project. And this week, we also had a listener poll. We're still working through some of the names for the characters, and you, the audience, got to vote on the name of the neighbor character. We've been calling him the neighbor. Very important character role here, but we had a couple different options that were suggested by audience members and then voted on. Those options were, we had Jeremy, Brandon, and Rodrigo. Very good options, very good options. And what was the outcome, Andrew?
Brandon won, although just barely. There was a lot of votes for Jeremy, surprisingly. But Brandon is what it's going to be. So the neighbor character, which we love and has a very important role in this movie, I would say almost a central role outside of the two main characters. He's a very important character. And yeah, we're going to call him Brandon.
Yeah, I like this character a lot. I think he has a lot of depth, a lot of, there's some mystery to him, kind of an antagonist, kind of a main character. And I think at different points in the story, you're not quite sure how big a role he's going to play, which to me is a really cool thing about a film. When you get to know the universe of the characters, you know that they're going to play some kind of role, but they go in and out of really mattering to the story. So I think this is a really exciting one. I was rooting for Rodrigo, but Brandon is going to be good.
Mhm.
I like that. I like that. So thank you to everyone who voted, and we will keep going with this. Obviously, eventually we're going to run out of names for the characters, but we love having you involved as you listen and as you vote. So thanks for everyone who participated. All right. So before we get into our film of the week that we're going to be discussing, what have you been watching, Andrew?
I have watched this show that I think won a few Emmys, and it's called The Studio on Apple TV.
Oh,
Oh, wow. I have heard of this show. I've heard good things about it. I just decided to start watching it this week, and I am very impressed. It's a really, really fun, well-written show. It's it's interesting in the sense that the show doesn't have a lot of like action or a lot of things going on. It's very dialogue heavy, but it's very quick dialogue. It's very clever. It feels with the way that they film it, like there's a lot of energy behind it. At least the first, I think, two or three episodes are filmed as if they're one shots, and just the energy of the camera going back and forth, the handheld camera part of it, you just feel like there's so much going on, and every conversation gets all this energy and momentum behind it. And it's a very fun show about a guy who becomes a studio head. So it's like he's in charge of green lighting everything in the studio. Everybody comes to him for what they need, but then he also has a boss who wants to make dumb movies that make a lot of money, but he wants to make good movies with these artists. And just that conflict is so funny to watch it play out. I'm guessing based on, loosely based on real things that have happened to studio heads, but highly recommend it. It is very funny and very well written. I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm about halfway through.
I had heard about it a little bit, but I didn't quite know what it was. And then I saw several episodes on a plane recently, and I was really, really impressed. There was another TV show that came out recently that was also about like the making of a movie, and
Yeah, because that idea has been done before, but
the
they just
idea's
do it
been,
so well here.
they really do. I mean, and I think just the quality of execution, the actors, the writing, the filmmaking approach too, I think is really interesting and unique here. It also speaks to the experience of the people involved, that they really know what they're talking about, as opposed to
Right.
Sometimes people make a inside Hollywood movie, and it doesn't give the impression that this is really how things work. It seems like that's the just the stylized version of it or something. But yeah, the show's really, I know a fair amount about how things work, and it rung true, but also, things don't need to be 100% true. They just need to give the sense of being true, and I think this works really well.
Yeah. I know it's exaggerated, how they play it out, but it does feel like there's some authenticity at its core of like they've experienced something like this, and then they get Martin Scorsese or whoever to play it out with them, and it's pretty funny.
Yes, the Martin Scorsese Kool-Aid movie. I saw that
That
was
was
a
such a good
hilarious
one.
episode. Um, Speaking of things that are realistic or at least give the impression of realism, I recently saw A House of Dynamite, which is out in theaters, but it also is now on Netflix. It's a feature
Mm,
film. I actually saw it twice in the theaters, which is a rarity for me. But
really? Why was that?
I saw it, thought it was really great, and then my wife wanted to also see it,
Oh,
and so
okay.
we went back together. And it is
Same day?
no, a few days later,
Okay.
but
Just a full break.
it was interesting also like seeing it a second time because it's such a taut story. It's basically it's all sort of inside the US government in it's not the real people from the government, and they don't line up with the people who are in power now or who were in power 4 years ago. It's just sort of generic people in power, but uh, very realistic in terms of these seem like the kind of people who would be in charge of these things, and all of these different roles, from people working in the White House, the president himself, Secretary of Defense, generals, all sorts of different people. But basically, a nuclear missile has been identified as in the has been launched somewhere in the Pacific, and they eventually determined that it is coming toward the U.S. And they have something like 18 minutes, or by that point, like 15 minutes to figure out what to do about it. And it's just incredibly tense, and the film is told from multiple different perspectives, so it's playing with this very short amount of time, but you're seeing it from different perspectives. And my understanding is that it is quite accurate. And again, it's one of those things where I think it is quite accurate. It's directed by Catherine Bigelow, who is
Oh,
famous for having a lot of access to the people in these situations, whether it's
you did
military or
Zero Dark
intelligence
30,
or
right?
government. So there is a lot of that I think is accurate, but also, it just speaks confidently. You feel like it's accurate one way or another. And it is, it's a tense kind of thriller, but it's also then all sorts of moral, ethical questions that come up about, what would you do if you were in this situation? And what would you do if you were various different people in this situation? With, are you the president making this decision? Are you this person making that decision? Are you what? And I think I found it an uncomfortable watch, but really compelling. My wife thought it was just fun, but so different perspectives on it. But I think that would be a high recommendation for me.
Well, I feel like that seems like something Catherine Bigelow would excel at in making that type of movie. So I'm sure it's very good. I'd like to see it then. That sounds very
Yeah,
interesting.
Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30. Playing off those, realism, tension, high stakes, all of that stuff. That's really her wheelhouse. And
What is that one?
this one I would add to that. And it's written by Noah Oppenheim, who wrote. I think he's a historically a journalist, but he wrote the film Jackie as well,
Oh
which
yeah,
is another sort of looking at behind the scenes famous events, but not the story, kind of approach, which I thought was uh, just a I thought it was just really well crafted kind of storytelling. And it's an interesting, if you look at it on a filmmaking level, like the different approaches to time, which is not the main focus of the film, but it is interesting. It's kind of like Run Lola Run,
mm,
uh, it's very different from the Run in almost every way, but it's kind of like that
Kind
in
of
that
like it.
it's sort of playing in real time, but that real time is even shorter than the length of the film. So it's playing in real time, but then kind of repeating or
Oh,
showing from different perspectives. So it's,
you said it's a
um,
15 minutes before it hits or something. Is
I
that what
mean, I
the?
think it's 15 minute. I think it's like 18 minutes, something
Okay,
like that. But it's
but you're
at
getting
different
different
points you realize
perspectives.
that it's actually an issue.
Oh, okay, so it's like different perspectives throughout that time of what different people are doing.
It's kind of told as a triptych. So it's like
Mm.
there's one, you play it through, also sort of like the film Weapons did this kind of
Mhm.
similarly, but it it plays through most of the story, and then it resets and plays again through that same time period, but with different people.
Different people. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I like when that's done really well. That's a really cool way to tell a story.
It's a really interesting approach, and it, pluses and minuses, because it, you know you have the pluses of, you saw a little bit of something in one version of it, and now you're seeing more of what was actually happening there in this version, and that's kind of fun. There is also something frustrating about, you want the story to just keep moving forward and not reset, so that
Right.
there's a tension there that is definitely an interesting storytelling choice.
If you can get that right, because it does seem to be kind of the draw of like, I know the story so far. Do I want to go back to the beginning? And you need like a really good reason and a hook to like, okay, this is going to be a fun to see this again from a different perspective. Or like when films go back in time, they start here and then it's like, now we're going back. And it's like, I don't know if I want to go back. You got to like, feel like it's a harder ask as an audience to be like, we're going back and you're going to like it. Like you have to really show that it's worth it right off the bat for the audience to just get on board with like, okay, yeah, this is going to be fun. I do want to see this now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think default is we just move forward in time, so you sort of have to justify it and make it worth our while if you're going to do something different. But if you do that, it can be really interesting, and I would say this does it really well. And it has even some shocks. I would say it has some shocking moments, like toward the end, uh, that, like, yeah, not spoiling anything, but you have already experienced the story, and things were happening that you didn't realize were happening along the way,
Mhm.
and so
Oh,
it
yeah.
actually does a really interesting job of playing with that you were seeing it from one perspective, and you had no idea that something else was happening in the other perspective.
Oh, that's fun. I love when stories do that. You set it up, you're like, oh, you did it. I didn't see it coming, but it's all there, laid out for me.
Mhm.
That's always fun.
So those are the studio House of Dynamite. I'd say we have a
That's a
pretty
good
good
week to watch them.
recommendations for this week. Not always winners, but this week's pretty good. And we'll be right back after this.
Elmer's glue has been the most trusted brand in glue since 1951. The world has changed a lot since then, but Elmer's glue still bonds surfaces together. And it's not made from dead horses. Elmer's glue comes in all kinds of colors, even sparkle. Elmer's glue is the perfect solution for gluing macaroni to paper, making slime, pouring a small amount into the palm of your hand to let it dry out so you can peel a thin layer off your skin and play with it. And it's not made from dead horses. Elmer's glue is the glue for people who need glue. When you need glue, think Elmer's.
And we are back. All right, so let's talk about The Dark Knight and about the film of the week that we're going to be discussing. The very little known, obscure title, The Dark Knight. What are we dealing with here?
The Dark Knight, a 2008 film by Christopher Nolan, written by Christopher and Jonathan Nolan. You've probably heard of it. The logline here: Batman raises the stakes in his war on crime with the help of Lieutenant Jim Gordon and District Attorney Harvey Dent. Batman sends out to dismantle the remaining criminal organizations that plague the streets. The partnership proves to be effective, but they soon find themselves prey to a reign of chaos, unleashed by a rising criminal mastermind known to the terrified citizens of Gotham as the Joker. And that's really the core of the story here. I feel like it's the Joker. Everything revolves around his character, his decisions, And if you weren't going to call it The Dark Knight, I feel like calling it the Joker would also be a good title for this one. It's a very prominent figure in this movie.
Yeah, it is interesting considering I don't know if you were aware, but there has been another movie called
The
Joker,
Joker.
but and then a sequel too. But it is interesting that I think a big part of this film is that we really don't know what his deal is, the Joker.
Right.
And in fact he hints at it and then it becomes clear that he's lying. And so it's this big mystery of who the Joker is, where does he come from, why is he the way he is? And really at the end of this movie we have no idea. I mean, the all the information we've gotten, some of it might be true, but there have
Sometimes
been
not.
so many lies mixed in that it might well be that none of it is true, and that's not really the point of this movie.
Mm.
Whereas it's then interesting to then have a whole movie about his backstory, which is interesting and all, but it is in some ways it's just a very it, you could say it's kind of undermining the point of this movie that it's
Right. Because even by the end of the movie, you don't really know. You've spent all this time with the Joker, and you're like, I don't know. I don't know what his like. I know his philosophies on life, and that's about it. You know, and like the whole movie, like every scene that he's in, mesmerizing. One of the great acting performances of our time. Um, and he really just steals the scene every time. But you really don't learn anything about him or his backstory other than this is a guy who acts in ways that just seem very foreign and very unusual to everybody else. He's just so different than the rest of the world. And then, well, definitely than our main character, just a perfect antagonist to him. That that's an interesting point. Like even by the end, you're like, I don't know anything about this guy really, and yet you've spent all this time with him, so you feel like you know him, but you don't know the details of his life.
it's an interesting. I mean, I think the famous line from the Alfred character is about how some men just want to watch the world burn,
Great
and
line.
that seems to be the defining aspect of this character, where that you have Batman. I mean, you have these sort of different camps in the film. There's civil society, kind of the Bruce Wayne, uh, the commission, Jim Gordon. I mean, you have just normal society of Gotham. You
Mm-hmm.
have the criminal like underworld of Gotham, represented by all the mob and the crime families there. And then you have Batman, who is interesting because he I'm not going to spoil Batman's true identity. No, I definitely will. But Batman doesn't fit into actual civil society. He's not a police officer. He isn't like officially doing this, and I think the movie plays with that idea of, is he a good guy, unequivocally a good guy, or is there a darkness and danger to him in and the way that he's approaching things? And I think we see that too with all the copycat vigilantes that are trying to be Batman. Um, and I think that suggests also that like it's not just clearly good that there's Batman. Batman does have some negative side effects of being there. But then you have the Joker, who he's not nice civil society, but he also doesn't seem to be motivated by all of the things that are motivating the normal criminals. He he seems to be willing to burn it all down, whether
When he
it's
burns that
criminal
stack of
or like
cash,
normal society.
yeah, like him burning that stack of cash is like the ultimate. I mean, it's at the end of the movie, and you're like, oh, like he's not just saying it; he's actually doing it. Like then burning the his half of the cash, and yeah, it's just to see the Joker so far on one side, and you kind of have Batman in the middle, and both sides are like, you belong with us, and Joker's like, you belong with me, and he makes a really compelling case, especially in that interrogation scene where kind of the whole story kind of flips when you have Batman interrogating the Joker. And up to that point in the movie, it's been this kind of a cat and mouse of like, we got to catch this guy, and you think that's the whole point of the story, just catch the Joker. They catch him, and then you realize, oh, the Joker still has all the power. Like he can
Hmm.
be behind bars, you can have him in a room locked up, but he's still in control of the situation. And it's like the whole story is kind of like in the like the the gravity of everything kind of dawns on you, and you're like, oh, this is way bigger than just one guy, you know? And he's trying to get like the people on his side. He's showing Batman, you're like, you're a lot like me. You're an outcast like me. And to see kind of at his core, Batman always chooses the good side, but he's like questioning, like, is this how it's going to turn out? And it becomes this story of, okay, we need to catch the Joker, to a story of we have to save like the soul of the city. It's almost this like good versus evil played out in a bigger way of like for people, like what are the people going to choose? And it's interesting how it kind of evolves into that when it starts off very grounded on this one person and just catching him. And it so naturally goes there because they play the themes so well in this movie of just that, which side are you on? The unstoppable force meets an immovable object. That whole thing of just Batman has his philosophies that he lives by. The Joker has his. They're complete opposites. And how does that play out? And it's like, well, that's how it would naturally play out in a movie. And it's done so well that you don't even realize it's happening until you get there. And I've seen
Mhm.
this movie so many times now that you know what it's coming. But even now you're like, oh, it's just so good how they lay it out and how each scene just kind of evolves slowly to become this huge thing that you didn't see coming from the beginning. You're like, wow, how did we get here? It really becomes something more than what you think.
There's a really interesting aspect to the sort of the climax of the film where like the it's not really Batman who saves the day, it's the people saving themselves. And I think that's a really interesting reflection on a superhero movie, which
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a little bit of that in the first Spider-Man, or maybe it's the second Spider-Man, but back with the Tobey Maguire
Yeah.
Spider-Man. But but here it's pretty rare for a superhero film to have like really, the hero's doing some stuff, but ultimately it comes down to, will the people save themselves? Will the people rise to the occasion? And ultimately they win in a way that the hero couldn't have done for them. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a really interesting element just on a sort of a universal storytelling idea, that and sort of a idea for life, that the people saving themselves, not just relying on one hero to come and save the day. um it's also, there's a whole element of this that is more topical to its time, and I think as years pass from when it was made, we we lose some of that perspective. But I think a lot of this was a reflection on the George W. Bush Patriot Act era. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost weird to say now because that's not what we spend a lot of time talking about these days. But um, the idea of we feel, this is post 9/11. This is, we are afraid of this force, this bad force. We can all agree it's bad, but we're not sure
Mm-hmm.
how to fight it. And somebody comes in and says, I will take all this power, upon myself, and I will see everything that's going on. I will have this whole surveillance, situation. I will have all this power, and I will keep you safe. But there will be implicitly a loss of freedom that goes along with that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that those were issues that people were definitely struggling with and figuring out, what do we compromise? How do we balance this? It just doesn't seem like that's like those are the fears, or that's the situation that people are dealing with in the same way now. I mean, a lot of those issues might still be present, but it's not sort of what's on the top of the
Yeah.
hot topic these days. But it is interesting, I think, that Batman comes in as this attractive hero, and we want him to have all the power and all the
Mm-hmm.
information to be able to save us. But the movie raises serious questions about whether that's a good idea, and then suggests that ultimately it's the people themselves who save themselves and not Batman coming in who does it. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really, really interesting reflection.
It does seem like a different world back then than it does now. This movie's coming up on 20 years here pretty soon. And yeah, it is very different. Are you thinking about that? I was just thinking about that scene with Lucius Fox where he has all of the phones are giving out their signals in the whole city so he can find the Joker. And like that being like a great fear of people at the time. And like nowadays, it's like we kind of know our phones are tracking everything, and that's I'm sure that's happening, in real
We
life.
sign up to get tracked. I mean, it's
We
the
sign up
world
to
has
get
changed.
tracked. And it was like this huge moral stance where Fox is like, can't be part of the company if you have this. And he, ends up deleting it at the end. But like, just those issues seem so much smaller. I don't know if they're smaller necessarily, but they seem very different than the issues we are facing with today. It's like we've evolved past this, and I think the movie hit a lot harder, at least to the general population back then, than it would now. On a rewatch, I still love the movie, think it's great, but like the personal aspects of like, does this apply to my life? And do you see these themes in the world? Not as much anymore. It's changed a lot, which is that's an interesting observation.
And I think that's an interesting point about art and film and storytelling in general, that it is valuable to look at the society around you and comment on the society around you, with your art and with your stories. And that can be really powerful, but it's unlikely to be timeless. The
Yeah,
timeless stories are going to be the ones that just get to the human condition, and the ones that are, really pointing at specific issues in our society today, that might matter more for this year, but then it won't make sense in 10 years. Whereas, and so that's not good or bad, but it is something to be aware of. Whereas the, thinking about good and bad, human emotions, human relationships, those are always around us. And so there's a timeless quality to those.
right. Yeah, this definitely deals with the kind of the bigger issues at large, and I don't know if the Nolan brothers were did that intentionally or not, or if it was just part of just the energy of the time to just bring up these topics. But it fits very well with Batman as like the superhero movie, which, going back in time, this kind of changed superhero movies moving forward. It was the first superhero movie to make $1 billion. It was this huge hit. Um, and the idea like this, the way that they use a Batman and a Joker to explore these themes and these topics is interesting because when you're watching it, I found myself this time like having to remind myself this is a superhero movie because it feels very grounded in like a reality that doesn't exist, but it's like close enough to where you can get lost in it very easily, so it doesn't like bring you out of reality all the time where you see things that you're like, oh, we're in space now, or, we're not here. Like everything seems like it's plausible. And like even the technology, we're like, oh, looking back now to like from today back then, I'm like, that doesn't seem, that crazy for him to have that stuff that he does. But yet it's still this superhero movie at its core.
Well, and I think that speaks also to the kind of superhero that Batman is. I mean, it's. I mean, I think some of the Tim Burton films, some of the other films are a little bit. The earlier films are a little bit more, uh, yeah, a little less grounded, maybe, and certainly the Joel Schumacher and I don't know who directed the other one, but anyway, the earlier Batman films were a little less grounded. Certainly, the TV show. I grew up watching the TV show.
Yes.
It was like on in the afternoon. On
The reruns.
we didn't have cable,
Yep.
so it was on the free TV. There used to be you'd have like three channels, and then it became four channels with Fox. But there were also a few other channels that were just sort of like local TV playing reruns.
Yep.
um, I don't know if that's UHF, whatever it was. I am not an expert on old TV channels, but there would be Batman in the afternoon, and I'd watch that after school, and it was so much fun. so much fun, but less grounded, I would say. A lot of the comic book like kapows and the
Oh yeah.
like the
Like
like
if
purple
that's how
costume.
they evolved from that. Like if the creators of that show are like, in the future we're going to have this version of Batman, they'd be like, wow, that's a change. It's a very different
it's
take on it.
it's kind of a different audience, I would say, for
Oh yeah,
Adam West versus the Christian
Christian
Bale.
Bale.
But it does seem like Batman in general, though, he's a detective. He's not, and he's a detective, and he is a normal person, and I think that is fundamentally different from almost every other superhero who has some kind of special superpower. I mean, he's really not a superhero. He is a
He's just rich.
detective who has like special tool. He's rich. His
He's
superpower is
able to
wealth.
afford all of his stuff.
Yeah,
Like he can create a Batmobile because he has the money to do that. He can create all the cool tools because he has the money to do it. That's part of his thing. But the other part is, he trains so
yeah.
he can actually fight people.
So he's between if you were, I think this is Mark Zuckerberg now because he's very wealthy and he's gotten into jujitsu. I think he's
He
trying to
could
be
be doing
Batman.
this. That could be his ultimate goal. And, let's see it play out in real life.
I'd I'd love for the I'd love to see Mark Zuckerberg take on the Joker.
Take on the Joker, whoever that would be. Yeah.
But I would say that this film though is it I there's a sameness to a lot of the superhero movies where it's that somebody's coming to destroy the world, or they're looking for a stone, or we're looking for the stone or something like that, and we have to
Yeah.
fight them, and it's going to be a bunch of punching in the sky. And this is, it has big action sequences. There is a certain element of, oh, there's a bad guy who's trying to destroy everything, but there's so much more going on in this that is I mean, it really seems like it's a social commentary, character study, detective story that we've we've made it into a Batman movie so that we can make $1 billion from it, but that it's
Right.
actually such a more interesting movie than that.
You could make this movie without Batman. Like, potentially, you could do something, just the core of the story isn't like a Batman thing. It's just Batman is a way to play this story out if you wanted to. And it's a fun way to do it. But yeah, it does seem like it's not necessarily about what does Batman do, which again, like at the beginning, it's very clear. We got to stop the Joker. Everybody wants to stop the Joker. And then it becomes so much more. And you're like, oh, this just evolves into a movie that is no longer feels like a superhero story, And if you compare it to, I think the movie that came out recently was called The Batman with Robert Pattinson, and also a great movie, but very different in the way that it's, Batman is this detective guy, he's a recluse, and it's more of like actual just a detective movie, and how he follows the clues to figure out the story. And that feels also within the realm of Batman, whereas this, it's almost like you could do this, with or without the Batman part of it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of an interesting take. And when you think of Christopher Nolan as a director, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of who he is, and he's the only one who would do this type of a story using this. He's like, I want
Yeah,
to make $1 billion and tell a cool story
yeah.
that I want to tell.
I do think that there's, I mean, there are a few people, Christopher Nolan, James Cameron, um, different from each other, but they've really perfected the I'm going to tell the story that I want to tell, and I know how to do it in a way that will bring in lots and lots of money. And it
Right.
seems like most artists are torn between one or the other. And then
Mhm.
there are just a couple who really figured out. Adam Sandler,
Yes.
different kind of art, but he does what he wants and people like it.
And he makes a ton of money doing it.
Yep.
Yeah. To be true to who you are and be like, this is just like the movie industry, just that's what they're looking for. If every
Yep.
director was a Christopher Nolan type, all these studio heads would be like, I want him to make every movie because it's going to make a ton of money. So we make the money and he gets to make what he wants.
The we were asked. You were talking about the did we need Batman in this movie? And so that raises the question to me of Harvey Dent and what do we think about Harvey Dent in this movie? There to me, there's an interesting, like, he's sort of morally incorruptible, but then he turns, and I don't know if that is. It's interesting because the Joker is just pure manic evil.
Hmm.
Batman is living in this real gray zone of he does things his way, but he is doing it for good. But Harvey Dent is sort of this incorruptible positive force who then gets corrupted, and that's an interesting aspect that the movie's dealing with. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's good to bring up because the Joker just takes so much attention in this movie, and you're like, okay, he is the reason everything's happening. But the Harvey Dent character is really the glue holding this whole thing together. Of like the you can't have the Batman and the Joker go back and forth without this middle character guy who's kind of the bridge between them, him and Lieutenant Gordon, that are the bridge between the real life people and these two extreme, superhero characters. And the way that he plays out. So I was thinking about when I was watching the ending of this movie and how it's just like this perfectly sums up everything, which seems like a very tall task to ask when there's so many storylines. First of all, characters, different storylines that all have to come together. They all kind of work together. And then at the end, to just tie it up with this scene where you have Harvey Dent laying on the ground, with the Two Face, the burn face, just tried to kill Gordon and his family, stopped by Batman, and you see the fall from the beginning of like this guy's the prince, the White Knight, and now he's fallen, and how they then put the burden of, okay, well, the Batman did all these things, because the people need to have their faith rewarded, which is a whole other like deep philosophical question of, do we lie to people to build their faith? And it's like, well, we are right now. And it just feels like that's the right thing to do in the moment of this movie, where it's like, if you were to start off and be like, this is what I want, this is where I want it to end, be like, I don't know, that just seems like a stretch to be like, we're going to lie to people to reward their faith in what they believed in. And that, but like in the movie, that's where it should end. Like it just is a complete story. Everything makes sense. You're like, this is the perfect way to end this. And it is so interesting how you get there. And I think the Harvey Dent character is kind of the driving force behind that, how it ends up in that, morally, what are you doing? What are you saying at the end of this movie?
Yeah, it's a really interesting. I mean, and the idea that Batman is going to sacrifice. Well, I don't know. It's not clear to me how much he cares about being liked or how much he cares
Right.
about people looking up to him. In many ways, he lives in the shadows. He wants to hand off the baton to somebody else. So I'm not sure that it is that big a sacrifice for him. But um, but he nonetheless sort of sacrifices his own goodwill for he becomes the villain and Harvey Dent becomes the hero, and that's an interesting part of it. It is. I thought Aaron Eckhart playing Harvey Dent, uh, he just seems he's maybe more to me than most people. He seems like the perfect actor for this. He's got
Oh
such
yeah.
an all American look, but also his whole story is a little bit of very very wholesome, then a little bit corrupted, and
Mhm.
it's an interesting kind of Aaron Eckhart. From being in church movies as a young man, like church instructional movies, to then I remember him in The Company of Men, which is a great Neil LaBute film, which was sort of the intro for both Aaron Eckhart and Neil LaBute. Very dark, twisted film. And here, I think he, in many ways, just he is a great character or great actor for this part because he is someone who looks so wholesome and
Mhm.
has like a real complexity. I mean, I think has a complexity to him as a person, but I don't need to judge that. But I think has a complexity that he can bring to the character that is, you at first don't think there's going to be complexity there. You at first think that
Mhm.
he's going to be just a straight arrow, and then you discover, oh no, there actually is something deeper and a little twisted here, which adds a level of complexity to the character.
Yeah, you want to believe, like you want him to save the day. Like he's just so like you look at him, and you're like, yes, I just want that guy. He pulls off that charm of just bringing you in and being like, I can see the appeal of why people would want him in charge. Especially that intro scene where the guy pulls the gun on him in the courtroom, takes it off, and it's like, buy American, that whole, it just sets him up really well to be like, oh yeah, this guy is cool. He knows he's very confident. And the whole time you're like, this guy knows what he's doing. He's very good at his job. And the whole movie is kind of full of people that are just really good at their job, which is also always fun to watch. Everybody being competent and yet still things going, out of control. That's always a fun thing as well. Lieutenant Gordon has the twist death where he pretends to die and then he comes back, and it's like, well, that was a smart move too, you know. And but to see that play out, and in real time, you're like, you get on board with all these characters and you agree like are the people who should be in charge. And then the movie takes you to work, you know, you as it kind of puts you in the place of, if I was a citizen of this city, this is who I'd want in charge. And then you watch it play out and you're like, oh yeah, it's never how you think it's going to be. It's always, there's more to it. There's a lot more depth to what's going on than the surface level things, which as you said before, it's like very close to home of what was going on at the time, politically and culturally speaking as well. I thought Eckhart was going to be a huge actor after this. It's like, this guy's got it.
He had a lot of potential. I'm not sure
Yeah.
exactly where he went wrong. I mean, I think he has a fine life, but
Yeah.
but I don't know
I'm
why
guessing
he.
he made some money on this.
Yep. Now, one more question I have about The Dark Knight. Do you think it's too dark for a superhero movie? It is. I mean, they're not. They put it right in the title, but
Right.
is this like, is the Joker too evil and scary? Is the film too nihilistic? And I don't think it is nihilistic. I think it's actually very hopeful. But like,
Right.
is the film dealing with darker themes than what people want in a superhero movie?
I think at the time it came out, I don't think it was too dark. I think that's what people wanted without knowing it. And that's kind of why it was such a huge success, is like it hit home, culturally and thematically and everything. Today though, with the way that the big superhero movies are, like it's a stark contrast to anything Marvel. It almost seems like at the opposite end of the spectrum with how heavy the themes are, how dark everything is. The Joker is a character that, I was sitting there thinking, like, could I show my 9-year-old this? I'm like, I don't know. I think that like there's a lot of these scenes that are going to be too intense for definitely younger kids. Like it's surprisingly intense for a movie about what it's about when you're like, oh yeah, it's just Batman and the Joker. But like it's really intense movie. And I don't know that I would say it's too dark, but it definitely is very dark. And I don't know that you'd want a lot of superhero movies like this. They've tried to make more, and I think it's hard to do something this dark with a superhero movie. What do you
And
think?
it's interesting. Like, it's definitely darker than your Marvel movies. It's also, I think if you take a movie like Blade with Wesley Snipes, which was
Hmm.
supposed to be sort of a dark superhero movie, or superhero-ish, I guess comic book movie, but still like, sort of supernatural, superpower kind of movie, or Deadpool, which
Mm.
is definitely. I mean, I think a lot of kids watch it, but it's definitely an adult movie, not you know
It feels lighter, like more
it's R
lighthearted.
rated, but it's lighthearted. I mean, it has a
Yeah.
lot of gore, it has a lot of language, it has all sorts of stuff, but it is lighthearted. And Blade, I think, is a little bit more adult, but it's still just sort of a more fun movie. I think The Dark Knight is it's a grimmer movie
Hmm.
than a lot of those, and so it's not necessarily more more objectionable content in that sense,
Right.
but it
Yeah.
is just a grim movie.
It's almost like if you had a superhero movie that became horror, like it feels like it's closer to horror, but it's not horror, but it's closer to that than it is to other genres, to like action, like there's so much of it that just is very, yeah, like you said, grim. It's not like it's overly bloody. There's not swearing. There's not sexual content of any kind, really. It's just the themes are so heavy. And, there's a few jump scares, but it's almost like the images could just themselves be frightening, just, as you watch it with the context,
Yeah.
even though it's not objectively scary.
Well, and if you think about it, that's an interesting point you bring up about the horror movie. If you think about it, like a superhero movie is not really a genre in terms of
Right.
story structure. I mean, the superhero origin story is something that we've seen many, many times. It's a movie where somebody develops a superpower, figures out what that is, deals with it, has to reconcile that with their normal life, and then has to somehow defeat some kind of villain with their new superpower. So that's a movie format that we've seen many times. But beyond that initial like superhero origin story, there there isn't necessarily a genre structure to the superhero movie. It's just kind of a setup for whatever you then want it to be. And a lot of times the superhero movies will then just be a lot of them end up being again an origin story, but now for a side character or something like that. We're just going to tell the
Right.
same story, but about somebody else. But it is like there isn't really, and a lot of times I would say a lot of times it's like a road trip movie where the superhero needs to go on this adventure. They need to go on a journey to
Mm,
stop this from ending the world or something like that, or they need to go assemble the team of other superheroes to go stop this from ending the world, something like that. But there isn't necessarily any rule about what genre or what story structure a superhero movie needs to be, especially if it's not the first one in the series. And so it's it's interesting that we haven't seen more of that though, more experimentation
right.
with like different routes that you could take with it. And I assume people don't want to rock the boat when you have expensive movies that you want to make a lot of money with, but it would be an interesting thing to see more superhero movies experimenting with different genre.
Oh, that'd be fun. Because I feel like you could do like a pure horror, and Batman would be the one you do for that. Would be
That
You could
would be
definitely
pretty
go that route.
intense. All right, so this brings us to our discussion of Hollywood studio. For some reason, they're like the Dark Knight wasn't. We didn't quite make quite enough money with that, so
It should be
we want
two
to come
billion,
back to
not
you
1
guys,
billion.
and now we want to remake it. But first of all, what if we remake it as a family friendly film? How would you approach that?
I do think it's doable. I think you'd probably go the animation route. I was thinking of the Batman the animated series, which came out when I was really young. You might have seen it. I remember it coming on like the original, like animated from the early '90s, and it's a little darker, but it's like played on daytime TV for kids. And they had like a really good Joker in that. The Batman was very dark and intense in that cartoon, relatively speaking. And I feel like you could do a similar story as an animated movie, and it would definitely take down the rating level. You could probably get it down to like a PG, if you needed to. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm aware of that animated version, but I didn't really watch it. But I feel like if you really wanted it to not just be a little bit less objectionable for kids, but you want to make it like a family film, that's a tricky one. And I think you'd have to think about what is this film at its core, because certainly you could do a Batman story. I mean, I think the Adam West Batman is a family show. That I think that's totally fine. But
Mhm.
that's not really the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is a much different story than just a generic Batman story. Um, I think yeah, I think this is a tricky one to like what is the what are the defining features of this story? I think the the juxtaposition of Batman with the Joker, I think is a big part of this. The I think the the Patriot Act surveillance stuff is a big part of this, and I think the relationship between Batman, Joker, Harvey Dent is a big part of this. I actually don't think that the relationship with the Maggie Gyllenhaal character,
Yeah,
is
with
it
Rachel.
Rachel,
Yeah.
doesn't seem that central to the story. It seems like,
It's a continuation from the Batman Begins as a way to
yeah,
end that story. They kind of shoehorn it in there as like, oh, they both like her. And you're like, yeah, I
yeah.
know that's a thing, but it's like that just isn't that important compared to the other stuff. Yeah.
We're bringing that both from Batman Begins and from in the Company of Men to the two men both liking the same woman.
The same girl. Yeah.
Um, this is in many ways the Dark Knight is just a sequel to that film. The In the
I think
Company of
I
Men.
think technically it is a sequel.
But I do think I think you got to go. I think of Zootopia as such a great example of like
Oh, interesting.
adult themes, but in a kid friendly version.
Yeah.
Um, I
And,
think
and
you
when
can
you
get a
do that
lot.
animation style, that just automatically lightens everything too. The Pixar animation style.
And if you go back and watch Zootopia, it is a very adult. I mean, there's all these themes of racism, all these
True.
themes of like institutional corruption. I mean, it's a
Hmm.
very adult film with just A, cute animals, and B, like very funny, lighthearted moments. But structurally, it's a very serious adult film.
That's true. Yeah. I think making anything animation, it just makes it a lot more family friendly. you know,
I think you
Good
could
way
do
to-
that. I don't know if you ever watched the TV show Wishbone as a child, where
yes.
there was a little dog who just
On
walked you, like
PBS.
played the different parts of the dog played the different parts of the characters, and would
Oh, that
just
would be
take
a
you through
fun
like
take.
Shakespeare plays and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So I think if you had like a Jack Russell Terrier playing both the Batman and Joker, I think that could
Yeah.
make it more family friendly.
It's just too hard to take it too seriously. That's true. Yeah.
And the little dogs, arf arf, want to see a pencil disappear? Arf arf.
Pencil disappear. Little dog's driving a semi down the street, gets flipped up,
Yeah, if a
pops out.
dog's doing it, it's all good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I definitely think we found a good solution there. All right, so the Hollywood studio comes and says no budget film. This one I think is an interesting challenge.
Hmm.
Doing the Dark Knight for no budget, no semi truck flipping budget. This is a
The budget for this movie was 180 million, which actually seems low
seems low for today.
for today, but at the time I think was a lot. But yeah, give your take on this one. I had a tough time with this.
It's tricky. It's tricky. I mean, I think you got to just contain the story. So I think I my instinct was we keep the whole thing in the bank. So no budget is a bit of a
Hmm.
stretch. I don't know
Yeah.
how to do this for no budget, but if we have that bank robbery at the beginning, which is a really cool introduction, and then we just leave that behind. But I'm like, what if we have that one location and then the whole story basically plays out in that bank? The Joker is holed up in the bank. People are coming in and out. We have I mean, it wouldn't be the same story. It wouldn't be not that it would be
Yeah.
the same story, but I do think if you told the story in miniature and you had it take place, over the course of an evening in a bank standoff,
Uh,
as opposed to over the course of however many weeks or whatever that the story takes place, I think if suppose and you change some things up, but suppose it was the bank robbery, maybe he doesn't kill everyone immediately, like kill all of his henchmen.
yeah.
Maybe there are more henchmen that wouldn't work quite as well if we need the story to keep going in the bank. But if we had it in the bank, there's a standoff. They've got hostages, all of that. So we need to again, this isn't no budget, but we come into the bank. Batman's coming in, but you play with this idea of um, he has broken into the bank and we think that we have the upper hand because we're coming in with more force. We think we have the upper hand because we know the bank better than he does. And then we discover that the Joker, both in his twistedness and in his brilliance, has planned this much better than we expected. And so he actually knows the bank better than we do. And there are all sorts of booby traps or different, things that people, explosives and things as the police come storming in and whatever. That you can bring in the surveillance cameras of the
Hmm.
bank, but maybe he's manipulating those, something like that. I don't know. But I think you could play the same kind of interplay between the Joker character, the general police characters, and the Batman character, um, but all sort of condensed into one location and a shorter time frame. So I think that would be where I would go to
It's almost
if
like a hostage film where it all you have the police outside the building, you've got the Joker inside, you've got the characters in different parts. That's a big bank, in different parts of the rooms. Batman sneaks in. It's almost reminding me of like a Die Hard, type situation where it's like on one floor of a building and you kind of have hostages going in and out. And what was Die Hard's budget? Let's see here. Die Hard was 28 million in 1988. That's a little, that's not no budget, but that's a lot smaller of a budget, and it's way more contained than than the Dark
I mean, I
Knight
think
is.
you could have made Die Hard for much cheaper than they did make Die Hard. I mean, I think they
Yeah,
had the money, why not spend it? But I think you could have made almost exactly the same movie for a lower budget.
right. Yeah, I think you could do that here. That's a good idea. You basically have the interior rooms, and you'd have outside some cops talking. How do we get in? How do we negotiate hostages coming in and out? And you could still have the philosophy and the moral grayness of everything kind of play out. That might be a good way to do it. Really
It'd be
contain it.
interesting too because I feel like often with these kind of movies, like with Die Hard, the person coming, there's John McClane who's actually trying to solve things, but then the figurehead guy is just making a mess of it. It'd be interesting if the figurehead was Harvey Dent and he actually is doing a good job. It's not going to be enough, but he actually is
Right.
well-meaning and doing a good job.
Which is
That'd be kind of
how
a
the real
twist
movie
on the
plays out.
convention.
Everybody does a good job, and yet it still doesn't work out.
Yeah. Okay, and then if you had to do this as like a 10-part Netflix series, how would you do that?
I think that would be fun when you have these characters. Like the character of the Joker is such a good character. Assuming, we have Heath Ledger do it, but I mean, nowadays you could do that. But like just the way that he plays that character, I feel like you could have really a lot. You could make a whole TV show built around this guy coming in and out, you know, doing, I don't know, you'd follow the same exact plot of the movie here, but with these characters, the Batman as he is, the Joker as he is, the Harvey Dent, you know, Lieutenant Gordon, like you have just a great groundwork to tell so many different stories and really just go crazy with it that I feel like you could do. Well, they do have like the Penguin is on HBO, I think, and that
Hmm.
does really well. But something like that, but with the Joker character, I don't think that'd be too hard to do to take from this.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think this is kind of the easier one of these three because it comes from a comic book, then TV show, and then the movies are all a little bit more episodic. It's there are, and I think even within the Dark Knight film, it's like there's a whole section of what going on a bounty hunting mission to Hong Kong. It's like
Right, that could be an
like
episode.
that doesn't need to be part of this story, but it also could be an episode of the show. Like, and I think you could fill in cool episodes. I think there are a lot of characters that are introduced that we don't see that much of. I mean, I think exploring the criminal network a little bit more would be an interesting thing to do if you had more time. Um,
And you could take the Dark Knight Rises, the following movie, add that whole storyline into your TV show as well. And the Batman Begins, like the trilogy of the Dark Knight trilogy, could become a show. And there's so much there to pull from that, you could definitely do that.
yeah, it's an interesting. Would you say, just on that note, if you compare Dark Knight Rises to The Dark Knight, I don't think The Dark Knight Rises is as good a film. I don't think the story holds up as well. Um, but it's interesting to think of Bane and the Joker. And I think the Joker, I think those two characters are both fantastic. And I love Tom
Hmm.
Hardy.
Oh yeah,
Um, the opening on the plane is such a great scene, but it is with the it seems like the Joker is very clear that he believes in nothing and he just wants to watch the world burn. Bane talks about this whole revolution, which I think also was playing into the Occupy Wall Street of the time, which like these
right.
movies are weirdly topical, but
Yes.
but but at his core, I mean, I think Bane does believe in something more. I think the Joker just wants to destroy.
Yep.
Bane, I think, not that he really wants revolution for everybody, but I think he is motivated more by like personal grievance and
Right.
like you can point at an actual motive for Bane a little
He's
bit
got
more
a
than you can
backstory.
for the Joker.
You learn Bane's backstory in that movie, and you kind of feel bad for him, in a way, and you understand why he does what he does, which gives you like it makes him much less scary. When you know more about somebody, it's like, you know, I don't know why I'm like thinking of like in Signs you have the aliens that show up for like 30 seconds in the movie, and it makes them very scary because you know so little about them. It's almost like when you see the scary monster or whatever, and they're there and they have a whole scene, and you can feel them, you see them, talk to them. They become way less scary the more you know about them. And I think with Bane, that was part of like it's the reason he does what he does. You need to have that backstory in there. It's a huge part of the story. But yeah, to compare him to the Joker, it's like, well, he's just not at that level. Like the Joker is just so unique in that way that I think originally they wanted the Joker in Dark Knight Rises.
Oh,
That'd be interesting to see how that played out. It was going to be a
I mean,
different
I
story.
think Bane is a great character for the film,
Yeah,
but I think the Joker in Dark Knight rises to like one of the top characters of film.
just all
I
time.
think
Yeah,
Darth Vader, the Joker.
right.
I'm not sure who else, but those are the
Just so
Vito
iconic.
Corleone.
Yeah, like everybody knows them. Even if you've never seen the movie, you know who this guy is. And in some ways, it's like that was just the perfect movie, perfect way to go out. You don't want to see more of him. You don't want more info on him because that's part of what makes him so great is just the mystery surrounding him.
And I think that I think the Jack Nicholson Joker was a big hit, and I think the Joaquin Phoenix Joker is really interesting. Although I think there's a twist in the second Joker that changes changes everything that you thought was happening in in the Joker movies. But at any rate, like I think those characters like are really solid. I think Bane is solid, but Heath Ledger's Joker, there's just something
Another level. One
magnetic
of the
about it.
greatest.
It's so magnetic. It's like Darth Vader in that
Mhm.
it's you really want to root for him while
But
being
you can't.
100% convinced that he's evil. Like, and Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi softens a little bit, but before that, like it was very
Oh yeah,
clear he's completely evil, and yet you still think he's so awesome. And I think that's the Joker is the same kind of thing.
it's the same kind of like if he's in a scene, that's what you're focused on. It's like every small movement, every grunt, like every like little laugh, just the tiny little things he does, just they have you so hooked. And it's like when I think about the scene where he goes to the party, throws Rachel out the window, you're like, there's 100 people in that room, and there might as well just be him and Rachel. You like, because it's just like that's all I can see. I can't see anything else. Batman's there, but it's like if it was just any scene with Batman is a great, interesting scene, but you're just waiting, like, what's the Joker going to do next? He just
Mm-hmm.
steals it all, and that's very hard to do when there is so much other interesting stuff going on. The movie is very well done and it's like very interesting scenes, tension filled scenes. The action sequences are amazing, and yet you see Joker. It's like there could be a plane flying around, like a helicopter, a truck. It's like I want to see where the Joker is, and just to have that magnetism to him. It's really,
Yeah.
really incredible.
Yeah. Well, Dark Knight, do you think it holds up? Do you think I've been surprised, as I mentioned earlier, I am a film professor by choice. But a lot of my students have either not seen it or don't like it.
Really? Huh.
I think a little bit they've been too marvelized, and it
Yeah.
doesn't hit the superhero note for them.
See, that's what I was wondering. Rewatching this, it's hard to watch it with fresh eyes. Like I just know where I was when I saw it. I probably saw it 7 times in theaters when it came out. It was just such a huge movie in my life at the time. It's just like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. It's incredible. And like watching it, this week, I'm thinking, I'm like watching the action set pieces. I mean, these hold up. He does so much practically without the use of CGI that everything, these set pieces are so well done, and it's still really intense and really fun watch, that I think all that holds up. I think the Joker's character is just undeniably great. Um, but as you mentioned before, with the cultural feel of it, like at the time, this is what we were going through. I don't know how much of a core that is to the story to understand it or like it, because if it's that big of a deal, I can't take myself out of it because I remember what it was like. But maybe that's part of it, and that's why it doesn't have the staying power or the resonance it did back then. Maybe it's too much of the world of the time it was made, which to me, I still love it, think it holds up. But that's an interesting thought. Like kids today, would it, does that resonate with them, or is it just too much hype? I don't know.
It's interesting. I feel like if you go back and watch the Christopher Reeve Superman, I mean, it's very
Mhm.
dated in like the specifics, but you could basically just I mean, but you could basically use the exact same script and make that movie today. And it almost is like we had an era that was reacting to the superhero movies, and
Right.
now we've gone back to like the original superhero movies, and that middle era of a little bit more interesting, a little bit more intense films is not what people want these days. And I don't know. I mean, I think everything's cyclical, everything fluctuates, but it. I think if you saw Dark Knight when it came out, it was just such an experience, and I think it really holds up as a great film. I
Hmm.
think it worked extremely well in the moment to be a great film that $1 billion worth of people wanted to see, and that doesn't those don't always line up. But I think it definitely
Right.
still stands out as a great film.
Yeah, like technically speaking, the way it's written, the acting, every part of it is done so well. You can't argue it's not a well-made movie. But does it resonate with you? That's a whole other thing. It's like when, growing up, everybody's like, The Godfather's the best movie ever. And when you finally watch it and you're like, oh, like it doesn't blow you away because you weren't there when it came out. But yet I'm like, it's an amazing movie. But to me, it's not going to have the personal, resonance because I didn't see it when it came out, you know, and it's not going to have like the life changing part of it. And whereas I watch it, I'm like, this is an amazing movie. I really love it, but I'm not like, there are people who just live and die on the take of this is the best movie ever. You just have to see it. I wonder if it's just,
Yeah, I and
if
I
you were
do
there,
I
you were
do
there.
think The Godfather is the greatest movie ever. So I but I do think that there's a level of like whether or not you were there when it first came out. There's also a question of just like at what point in your life did you encounter it? And if you saw the
Yes.
movie at a time when you were ready to see a great film and that film really fit into that slot, whether that was when it came out or 30 years later or 50 years later, whatever, like that's going to be a different reaction than somebody watching a film
Yeah,
and not having a hole in their heart to fill.
exactly. If it hits you at the right time, it's going to make a huge difference. I remember the first time I watched Citizen Kane. I was like, really? That's it? And then I watched it like years later and was like, oh, I get it now. Like it totally flipped of like how I thought of the movie just by watching it at a different time of my life.
Yeah,
So,
Citizen Kane is one where it's a good story that holds up, but also it originated so much of how every other film has been made ever since, and so it's like you don't always give credit to the original once you've seen it a million times. You don't like whichever one you saw first was the is the one that you give credit to, not the one that actually did it first. And I think there's an element of
right.
that with Citizen Kane. I
you don't
remember
have
the
the means.
Matrix. When the Matrix came
Oh, yeah.
out, that was just mind blowing, and that was when I was in high school, and the Matrix
Yeah.
came out. It was the bullet time, like that was just so crazy. I mean, it was both like, can you believe what if we're all in the in the
Yeah.
machine,
The idea behind it as well. Yeah.
and then and now
It's been played
it's.
out,
I mean, I don't
copied.
even know if people aren't impressed by the film, but I mean, I think in terms of the special effects of the film, it's not groundbreaking anymore because it's been done. It's been copied so many times that it's not groundbreaking. But and the concepts within it are not earth shattering because they've been so widely
Not
talked about.
anymore.
But
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I feel like with the Dark Knight. I'm like, it had its cultural resonance at the time, undeniably huge at the time, still a great movie. Will it resonate with you at this point in your life? I don't know. Like you might watch it and be like, oh yeah, like I can see why people like it, but it's not for me. And I could see that. Just like, you watch The Matrix 30 years after it was made, it's just not the same impact it had when it came out.
yeah,
And, but still, it's an undeniable classic. Like this is going to hold up over time. I don't know how The Dark Knight gets left behind when you talk about great films of the past. Like what are the great films of the early 2000s? You have to include this movie. I don't know how you couldn't. Even if I would assume, going forward next 20, 30, 50 years, this is still going to have some, cultural relevance, or just, as a, you have to consider this when you're talking about these old classic movies, which it will be
and I
at some
think
point.
it'll be a fun treat for kids of the future to look up The Dark Knight as a like homework film, like as a I guess I got to watch it because it's a great work
Gotta
of
watch it for
cinema, and then
class.
it's so fun. And I think if you look at music, like people, I, I mean, I don't know what the kids these days are listening to, but I think there's a certain portion of the population that is always going to like music from like the 1960s when
Right.
they become teenagers, like because this music like for the first time was like we're breaking with convention, we're not just doing what our parents want, we're hippies or we're protesting or whatever. And it's also just a lot of, I think, objectively good music, but like there's a lot
Hmm.
of music from that time that I think 15-year-olds forever now will discover. And because it's their first time being 15 or 16, and for them, like hearing something that is like new and breaking with, not just doing what their parents said, is going to be always a revolutionary idea. And so I think these things, will keep
It
coming
comes
back. And
around.
I think with film too, it's, as we were
I
saying
think,
before, coming sort of full circle. Certain things are topical and certain things are timeless and universal. And I think that's
and even the
not all of
topical
this film is
things,
going to apply to everyone at all times, but
right?
so much of it is so good.
Because even the topical things in the future, there's so much more to it besides that. You could still have a good time with this movie. Like you're still going to enjoy it even if you don't know what was going on at the time. I can watch movies of all these black and white movies from the 50s and 60s. And I'm like, they reference stuff. I'm like, I don't know that I understand that reference, and yet the movie still impacts me, and I feel like this is a really great movie, even without getting all the cultural references they're talking about. So I think that's just part of life, and there's enough there that it's not going to be an issue. I don't think.
Yep. Yep. All right. Let's wrap up there. This is great film, The Dark Knight. I think well worth seeing. I think not a fun, like not a lighthearted family flick, but I think a great film to watch. I think this is one I would recommend. In that you know, I don't think it feels like homework. I think it feels like a really fun film, but I think it really stands out as a great film to keep tabs on.
Oh yeah, highly recommended. I would, if you watch any movies, you got to get to this one eventually.
And there we have it. Thanks for joining us for this episode of How to Make Films and Influence People. Check us out at howtomakefilmspodcast.com, and we'll see you next time.